Start record. I'll start recording from right now. So apologies to whoever's watching this. You have joined halfway through. It's been about an hour, and we've covered all the important things. So, but now we're in the actual application phase of the session where we're trying out the different setups. All right. So as you're driving, remember the things that we talked about in terms of describing what's going on with the car. Right. We're thinking about when is it happening? What phase of the corner is it happening? And now we're trying to describe what is happening, which is responsiveness, stability, and balance of the car. So keep those things in the back of your mind when you're as you're driving, because that's how we're going to describe the car's behavior afterwards. So after I mentioned what I said, I heard some. I don't remember who it was, but someone said, "Oh, it's unstable for me," right? Or something like that, right? But remember, where is it unstable? So even in the heat of the moment, I want you to think about these things. It's just like a driving technique where we're under pressure, where we're going to revert back to old ways of doing things. So the new way of describing things is fully describe the what's happening. So unstable where? Okay. Stable corner exit. And so that you guys can see just how detailed things need to be is okay, it's a corner exit, but what kind of corner is it? Is it a slow speed corner or is it a fast corner? Okay. So a fast corner. Okay, so look at that. Even another qualifier there. They're on the rumble strips. So if someone just said, okay, it's unstable, and I went ahead and increased the preload, for example, right? I would make it a lot more stable. But on the entry phase, would that have helped the driver? Nope. So how we communicate the feedback is really, really important. And remember, guys, it's 55 degrees on track. So this is the hottest that you've driven the track more than likely. So it's gonna be looser than you're used to for sure, because of the track up. And it's three wing, and I know some of you guys have been driving with five or six wing. Okay, so last lap here, and then we'll discuss. That setup? Okay. 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 Just finish up your lap, and then once we're all off track, we're gonna discuss. Okay, so no answer is wrong here, technically, right? So I just want participation, good participation from everybody, because I want everybody to practice how to describe the car. Even if it's not quite right, it doesn't matter. The goal is to describe the car based on the characteristics that we talked about, based on the when, the what is happening, right? Okay, so loose everywhere. Loose everywhere. Loose at transition. Off brake and throttle. So loose on throttle is what I heard. Okay. So notice how now we've gotten a little better in terms of describing, but even still, we're not quite describing completely because we haven't described what type of corner it is, right? It's not inherent. Um, it's not something that we do readily. It's something that has to be prompt, right? No, and normally that's the engineer's job. A good engineer will ask probing questions, and sometimes when I work on setup with people, they get a little annoyed because I ask too many questions, but part of diagnosing the problem is understanding the problem completely, right? So in this case, because we are both, we're doing both roles normally, we have to be very descriptive because there's not gonna be anybody to prompt us. So we got to prompt ourselves. So now we have to think about which corners this is happening, right? And we talked about how this track is it's got very different parts to it. Right, one part is conducive to a lot of aero. One part is conducive to more mechanical grip and less aero, and we want more top speed. And so it makes a difference if the problem is at T1 or if the problem is at the last corner or what is the chase. Whereas if it's at the cutting, for example, right, it makes a difference of what we're going to change, how we're going to approach it. So it's really important. So loose on throttle is one of the last ones I heard. But loose on throttle where? Okay. All right. So the okay. All right. So I heard a lot of loose on throttle, unstable corner exit, um, loose everywhere. Okay. Okay. Understeer. Throttle. And so low speed. Which corner would that be? Okay. So last corner. And the reason that matters is because that understeer at low speed, if you think about the last corner is fairly steep, right? Because you're going downhill, so it's easy to overload the front tires. Exactly. Exactly. It's not completely straight. If we look at it, there's it's a downhill, right? It's not a downhill like Forest Elbow, like downhill, right? like a dip like that, or the dipper where it's just completely down. But it is downhill. It's not fully straight. So that makes a difference, right? Yep. So all those things will make a difference into what we're gonna change. So okay, so that's good practice in terms of. So let's practice now what we would change hypothetically, right? A lot of it was loose on throttle at the transition of brake and throttle. So what specifically pops to mind? We talked a little bit about some of the changes that can be made, but off the top of your head, based on your prior knowledge, what do you think? What to change? Okay, so someone said diff. What on the diff would you change? Okay. So, but I thought the okay, so when someone says, for example, right, loose on the transition of brake and throttle, then normally that means it's unstable, right, at that point. And so to get more stability, remember we go if we go back and look at our notes here, more preload at the transition point, more locking means more stable overall, more stable overall throughout the transition point, right? And specifically on entry. But if the feedback is loose at transition or brake and throttle, then usually you would want more locking, right? You would want less locking if someone says it's not turning on entry, right? So just so then really it would be more locking, unless it's loose on exit. If it's so where specifically. So now we can get even more detail. Okay, so it's at the transition point, but is it more on like actual throttle or on release of brake? Okay, so if it's release of brake, then definitely more locking, right? Because you need it to be more stable, so more locking. Yep. Any other suggestions? Make this smaller. Any what to change? No, what to change? So someone said understeer on throttle. I think that was Joe. Understeer on throttle at low speed, specifically the last corner. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So that would mean more locking. So that would help us, right? Differential more locking would probably help us. So think about it doesn't matter that this may not be right. It's okay. Remember, the exercise is more about giving the feedback and then based on that feedback, what changes would you make? So understeer on throttle at low speed on the last corner. So let's take a look at our cheat sheet here, right? So if it's understeering on entry, that means that the weight's going forward, right? On entry. Wait, you said no on throttle. Understeer on throttle. So the weight's going towards the back, right? And so this is more of a balance issue that we're talking about. It's not a response issue. It's not really a stability issue, right? This is pretty clearly a balance issue. So what? Looking at this cheat sheet, there's a balance. We want more oversteer. Let's say we were to use the ARBs. ARBs would have like mid corner on would have pretty large effect. So what could you change here to get a little bit more rotation to cure that understeer? Uh, yeah, I should be sharing my screen. Yep. Okay, I'll reload. I'll reload. Okay, should be reloaded now. Okay. So ARBs would be here, the second option. So if we increase the front ARB, meaning and increasing means stiffer, right? Stiffer front ARB. Um, that would lead to more understeer. increasing the rear ARB, so stiffening the rear ARB would give us more oversteer. So that would probably be our solution to that specific one. Would be a little more rotation on throttle, would probably increasing the rear ARB. So in this case, we'll put increase. I like to use stiffen rear ARB. Okay, one rule of thumb to go by, and then we'll put it in here. Maybe I can find somewhere else to. Oh, here it is. Here it is. I would look at it. It depends, right? But remember what I said about the workflow, right? This list. The higher it is you are on there, the more it will influence other things. So yeah, if you can fix it with the differential, then yes. However, in this case, uh, I don't think it would get fixed with the differential because the differential is more like at the transition point, whereas this it seems like the description is more like on the actual exit. Like once you're like committed to the throttle, it's understeering, right? And the differential will not fix that unless potentially if we were to change the clutch plates, but that would have a big impact too on entry. So we want to if we can if we can impact just the side of the car that is the problem, is better than choosing an option where it's going to impact both sides of the car. And remember, the differential always has that compromise of it impacts the entry and the exit, always, both at the same time and in different directions. So in this case, it would be better to adjust the ARB because we're just going to impact the exit phase. We could also, yeah, that would be the reasoning why. And then we skipped this slide, but this is a rule of thumb: stiffer or softer. The rule of thumb is if you soften the side that the car is lacking grip. So if, for example, if it's understeering, so in this case we said either okay, so rule of thumb: soften the side of the car that is lacking grip, or stiffen the side that has too much grip, basically. Um, so either we're going to the side that's lacking grip under understeer is what? The front, right? So we either soften the front ARB, or we stiffen the rear ARB. And then these are the rules of thumb. If the car understeers, soften the front. If the car oversteers, soften the rear. Now, it's possible that you won't be able to soften the rear anymore, but there's another option, right? Stiffen the front if the car oversteers. But softening it is the preferred change over stiffening it. And I know this is a lot of info. This is a lot of, you're not going to remember all of this. So obviously I'm going to post this stuff, but it takes a lot of repetition of identifying what the problem is, and then driving, and then checking the change to make sure it is doing what you think it's doing. So it takes a lot of repetition to really internalize these things, right? So I'm gonna share another setup. Someone's engine just blew up, I think. B. Okay, setup B. I'm gonna share with everyone. All right, 3 more laps, setup B. So let's get out on track. So one thing to keep in mind as you're driving, so when you start thinking about the setup this way and about how to give feedback, you're being more precise on these things. So therefore, now you're gonna start feeling the car a little bit more precise as well, just because you're starting to think about these things that way. It's just natural that that happens. And if you are thinking that way, and you're starting to feel things a little differently and more precisely, well, that's a huge benefit to your driving because it's going to increase your sensitivity to what the force feedback is giving you, right? And so what's really important is loose grip on the steering wheel because that allows you to really feel the little micro corrections that happen throughout the corner. Okay, we're gonna finish this lap and park it. I don't think so. I see him driving. No? Oh, maybe not. Yeah, I think maybe he jumped off or got booted. One of the two. Yeah, maybe. Okay. All right. Give me a second. Let me pull up my notes here so we can start notating these things. Where is it? Oh, here it is. Okay. Okay. Repeat that one more time. What was it? Understeer on entry or okay, understeer on turn in? Turn in. Okay, good. High speed or low speed? Okay, low speed. Okay. All right. Any other? Okay. Okay. Yo. That was David, I think. Uh, And Nick. Okay, that was good. Hold you accountable to your feedback. All right. Feedback. Who else we got? Pete, Joe. Any feedback? Okay. Which one's quarter 23? Let's look at it. Okay. Let's look at it. Okay. Uh, let's look at it. Anybody else? Okay, everyone else can see it. So Joe, just try to reload it. Yeah, try to reload it here. Okay. What do you guys think? Just based on looking at this, not even looking at steering input. What are your overall thoughts on what's going on? Huh? Does anybody see understeer? Let's look at some other lap. Let's look at okay. So this is wait no, that was lap 9. So let me look at lap 10. Here it is. Here it is. Yeah, here it is. It's this one. Okay. Okay. So so I'll play it again. So take a look at where the actual break starts. Roughly the 100 board, right? So then, is the car really understeering right here? What do you guys think? Is this understeer? Yeah, but you do miss the apex, so there is some understeer there, right? That is driver induced because we missed the apex, probably from too late of braking, which can happen here. But the reality is the response of the car here is not really understeer. It's actually oversteer, right? Once we ask so much of it, the rear pop kicks out actually, and we can see that the rear right is leaving this skid mark here on the. Yeah, I think so. I think you're right. Because even here, like after it catches, you see the rear rotate. See that? If it was an understeery setup, what would happen here is you would drift into the dirt as you get on throttle, rather than it rotating. So yeah, so that points out specifically why it's important, right? To be able to see the difference between, is it the car that's understeering, or is it a driver induced understeer? And in this case, it is. And we can also look at the lap prior and take a look at, did it understeer there? And let's see. And again, you see pretty good rotation there on throttle. It rotates even more once you get on throttle. You see it. So I would say that and that's why it's important to review, not just give the feedback, but also review the specific thing. And we'll look at cockpit view because this will tell us, based on the steering wheel, whether you're asking more of the car here and whether the car is responding to that. And bam. So right there, that would be oversteer, right? Because look, there's a correction. So that is oversteer for sure. Um, I would actually classify this as understeer. This like is, but this is more just driver induced understeer in my opinion. I don't think this type of steering input was needed, and it kind of led to this snap right here because you asked a little bit too much and then it snapped because of that. Because that's what this car does, is it goes from understeer to snap oversteer. And so if you ask a little bit too much of the steering, then it'll snap, and you can kind of see that little snap there at the end. So I would say good observation, but it was more driver error on that one. Okay. Let me go back to far chase camera. Okay. Any other feedback? Okay. Okay. So you do get off the brakes fairly early there, right? It's fairly early release of brake because you want to transition brake and throttle at the apex, which is around here. So that I can't see the throttle input, but usually the throttle input happens right after you release the brake. So if that's the case, then throttling here would be too early, and it's probably not something that you're doing on your other laps. So okay, okay. Yeah, and you notice, I mean, so David was able to carry the brake just a little bit further than you, right? But the more you carry it all the way to the transition point, the more you're gonna feel the balance of the car. That's one thing. And I made a notation here, as you guys can see here on the top right, at the top. Past the edge of grip, there's no feeling on balance of the car. So if you pass the edge of grip on entry, meaning you overdrive the entry, you're not going to get a feeling for the balance of the car. Why? Because you're immediately on understeer, right? And it's a driver-induced understeer, and at that point, you're not going to feel it. And normally, there's going to be some instability there because, well, we're braking harder than we need to because we brake probably late. We're shifting more weight to the front tires. The rear is getting unloaded more. Therefore, more instability. Again, driver-induced, not setup-related. I saw quite a bit of this when I was reviewing. I was mostly looking at two places. I was looking at the Chase. I was looking at Forest Elbow. I really saw it a lot at Forest Elbow. And let's see here. Probably not this lap because this is a good lap from David. But basically, I was just going through as because you guys are kind of coming in a line here. So I just look at Nick, late break there. Okay, but missed the apex. Fairly good break. Really good apex. Yep. That was a good apex. Let's see here. Late on break, leading to that, what I'm talking about, past the edge of grip. So here, right, we're past the edge of grip. So the learning lesson here is that if you want to work on setup, and not just setup, if you want to work on driving technique, the first thing you have to do is make sure you get a consistent entry. And to get a consistent entry, you have to be conservative on entry. Conservative on entry, maximize exit. So no, you have to get out of the habit of pushing, and I saw it quite a bit from everybody. So I mean, it's not just one person, and this is normal. This is what people usually do, especially under pressure. You try to push for more lap time, and so part of this exercise, yeah. So part of this exercise is getting out of that habit so that you can start feeling the car a little bit more, increase your sensitivity to the car. So let's see Pete here. So a little bit late on the brake as well, and missed the apex, right? So we're not truly going to feel the balance of the car at the apex, which is the most important part. Up here, it's going to feel a little bit different for the car. And the setup change we want to make is for this, right? So, but that's why I, a lot of times, that's why I delayed doing a setup workshop because a lot of times you can be faster with just better driving than setup, but it's also important to think about setup in order to increase your sensitivity to what's going on with the car, right? So, what did you guys think was the change from setup A to setup B? So there's some stark differences here between the comments. So understeer on turn in, understeer on every exit, corner exit understeer, instability on the brake, and then setup A was let me put this to the side. All right, unstable corner exit, um, loose at transition, understeer at throttle, loose on throttle, loose everywhere. So it's funny, we have the loose everywhere and we have understeer on every exit. So stark differences, right, between some of these comments. So what do you guys think was the change that was made on the setup? Just guesses. Okay, so probably locking up the diff would lead to some of these comments, right, of understeer. I'm not gonna say. I mean, I want more guesses. Come on, more guesses. Okay, so you guys are not gonna like me for this one, but there is no change to the setup. All right, there is no change to the setup between setup A and B, and I hope that this this shows you guys right that it is more difficult than it appears. It is, and even for top drivers, they don't always get things right either. All right. But that's why it's so important to increase your sensitivity to it. Now, it was really easy to figure out what was going on with the other setup, the first setup I sent you guys, right? Setup E, that was very, very unstable and kept spinning you out. But when changes are small, it's hard to differentiate between the change. And if you're able to, then that's when you're going to start realizing, hey, my sensitivity is improving. All right. So, and we're going to continue to do some exercises here to increase your sensitivity. So we still got about 20 minutes. So we have two more setups to try. And These, I can guarantee you, they do have changes. Okay. So we're going to try setup B. I'm going to share that with you guys. Or do we try setup B already? No, yeah, we tried setup B. Uh, setup C is the one we're gonna try. After setup C. Okay, so let's get out on track. Let's do a quick 3 laps. Actually, let's do 2 laps because what I want to do is I want 2 laps, quick discussion, another 2 laps on the setup D, and then let's do a change together and go out on track, knowing what the change is. That would give us, more tries at it. That I made the change. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Yep. I tricked myself on that one. So remember, guys, past the limit of grip on entry means no feeling of the car. So be conservative on your entry, maximize that exit, and hit the apex. And that's when you're really gonna feel the car. You're gonna feel the settings of the car. If you're too close to it and you can see it, usually doesn't beep. Okay, let's go back to the pits. Let's go back to the pits. Alright, okay. Unstable, rear, transition point. And this was in the high speed stuff or slow speed stuff? High speed. Yeah, I saw that one actually. High speed. Okay. Nick, was that driver error at the top of the mountain? Okay. The okay. Let's see what happened here. Rewind. Mm, we definitely were on brakes late, really late, because brake is usually around here. Brake is usually around here to get the car settled, and you brake at the crest, right? Notice how the suspension is popping up right now. It's popping up because of the crest, and bam, you're on the brakes when it's completely unloaded. The car is unloaded right now because it's popped up because it just crest, and that and you're late on brakes too. So that yeah, there was just there was no way of saving that one in my opinion, unless you went straight. But at that point, you had already turned. So yeah, and let's look at this one. Okay, let's see. Some understeer there. Is this normal entry line, David? Okay. Let's look here. Okay. You definitely want to be on this curve. Yeah, definitely want to be not completely, but like this curve. Oh, oh, this curve. Yeah, yeah, me too. Yeah, I turn in right as right before I cross that. I turn in. That's when I turn in because you kind of want the car a little diagonal here, like this on the downhill. Yeah, exactly. Yep. So early turn in is better. Early turn in with a slight lift. Okay. So we had unstable rear transition point. David said, well, David's driving showed that there was some understeer there. Understeer on exit. Understeer on exit. High speed. Nick didn't take advice from last. No, I'm just kidding. All right. So, did you guys think that the setup overall, the balance of this? Let's look at the three things that we said how we're gonna describe the setup, right? Balance, stability, response. Balance. Was this new setup in comparison to setup A and B, which is the same setup? Was the balance more oversteery or more understeery? Any conclusive? More understeery from David. Anybody else? Okay. All right. Nick. Okay. All right. So, but we're still remember that's stability. That's more stability. So balance. Oversteer, understeer. So think balance mid corner. right? You can think of balance on entry on exit as well. That's fine. But like it, when you got on throttle, did it seem like the car rotated or did it plow? That's what I'm asking. Okay, more understeer. Okay, so it's a consistency of understeer. Okay, stability wise, did the car change stability? Was it less stable on entry? Was it less stable handling the bumps and curbs of the track? Nick says yes. So okay, so more instability is kind of what we're getting. Okay, so response wise, did you guys feel that the car was more responsive when you initially turned the wheel? Was it more responsive? Did you feel like the car went towards the apex faster than before? Okay. So not conclusive evidence, right, on responsiveness, whether that changed or not. Okay. So I'll show you the difference. This is the setup. It's got a different spring rate, 290 versus the 260 of the other setup, right? Ride height stays the same. So everything is the same except for one change, the spring rate. Spring, so it's a stiffer spring in the front. What would that do? Let's look at our cheat sheet here. So springs, increasing the front spring would increase the response. So we did hear some positives for a response, like it seemed like, but it wasn't conclusive, right? We said that balance would be more towards understeer, and that was a conclusive thing from you guys. Response that hey, it was more understeery, and we even saw it from David's perspective how it was understeery. It didn't seem like, from my perspective, it didn't seem like he did much wrong there on the entry, and it just understeered. And not really anything here in terms of stability, right? Um, but I would say that this change would probably help with stability because it would keep the weight on the rear a little bit longer, right? Because the springs are stiffer in the front, so it delays the weight transfer to the front, keeping it more balanced all around. So I would say that there would be an increase in stability for the setup, right, on this change. Okay, so that's good. That means that you guys are feeling that change. So now let's go to setup D, and we're gonna do 2 laps on setup D. I'm gonna share it. Okay, let's get out on track. And these last two exercises are more about feeling the change. We're not really talking too much about what to change to make it better because the changes that I've made to the car is just to see what you guys could feel. I don't even know if the change will make the car feel that way. I just made a change and I'm just think that that's what the change will do. So yep. Okay, so another thing to keep in mind is, right, that the tires don't actually reach their working temp, their max working temps, until about lap 7 to 9, depending on how long the track is. Having said that, right, a full stint is much longer than 7 laps, and so you won't truly get the true behavior of the car until about that time. So the exercise we're doing here is just to try to understand will, what impact these changes will have on the car. But at the same time, we have to be cognizant that the changes that we're experiencing right now could potentially be worse later on in the 7th or 8th lap, or may actually go away. So that's why it's so important to test any change for longer laps, anywhere from 4 to 10 laps, I would say, for checking it. And ideally, it would be a stint, to check a change. Um, but that's when you're closer to what the setup should be. Then you start really doing more long-term changes, long-run checks of the changes that you're making. And remember to truly fill the car, conservative on entry, and maximize exit. Hit the apex. Three criteria, three checks. Okay, we'll do half a lap more here after this one, just so you guys can feel out the set just a little bit longer. So once you get past the mountain one more time, actually, let's just do another lap. Why not? One more lap. What? And you threw him off because he heard who's the red car, and then he just started. He knew that I was looking. That's why. That's pretty good. There's some places for sure, but it's pretty good. Oh, okay. All right. So we should be done now, right, with the lap? Let's park it. Okay, so overall impressions on set D. Okay, so oversteer on throttle. And so more of the question is on balance, right? Balance. So we're gonna go back through it. So balance. What is the change about in the balance of the car? Joe says oversteer. What about you guys? Nick, David. Okay, so then definitely a stability issue there. That's what I hear when I hear that stability issue. Okay, okay, okay. Understeer. Okay, I like that. I like the way you're describing things, Pete. That's really good. Just yeah, I don't even have to prompt. You're already doing it. That's what we want. Mm-hmm. This is great to see the difference, of what a driver needs, and that's why when you drive in a team, there's always a compromise of what the overall setup is going to be because it's never going to fit everybody completely, right? So someone's going to have to sacrifice a little bit. All right. So it seems to be there's a consensus on oversteer here and instability and response. So so more response, which is good, right? Unless you can't handle the more response, then that's not a good thing. More less stability, that's definitely a negative, a bad thing. More oversteer, not necessarily a bad thing, unless it's too much, right? And it seemed though that there was too much from some of the things I saw. And then we did have a comment understeer, specifically high speed exit, right? And so we'll look at the setup here, and the setup change is spring rate in the rear has gone from 170 to 200. So a 3 click difference in the spring rate. That would lead us to more oversteer, right? So a balance of more oversteer because of a stiffer rear spring. And it seemed to me like you felt that. And as you saw, Pete, it seems like you can handle more of an oversteer car. It's something that it suits your driving style a little bit more than right, right. So something to think about in terms of setups. It shouldn't. No, it should not. It should not. But remember, the spring has one change, and it's a global change that affects the car everywhere. And some other things need to be probably changed to accommodate for the stiffer spring. One thing that the stiffer spring does is it's going to keep the car at a higher rake throughout the whole corner because it just doesn't compress as easily, right? So even though the ride height is the same, I maintain the ride height. The ride height is going to be higher. The rake is going to be higher throughout the corner, so it should not give you understeer. Definitely should not lead to understeer. Mm-hmm. Going back to that, right? Raising the rear. What's it gonna do? Let's go back to the cheat sheet. Raising the rear. Where's the springs? So increasing rear spring, it's gonna add response. We saw that there was an additive response. Balance was more towards oversteer, and we noticed that secondary effect of the spring is the change in ride heights across the corner. So it's going to raise the rear, and the rear is going to add some more response, and it's actually going to decrease stability. And we noticed that there was a decrease in stability because there was more mistakes too on the laps. You can see them, and the balance is going to be more towards oversteer. So the springs, I would say the spring has one of the most influential changes that you can make is the springs. Then ride heights, ARBs, wing, camber, dampers, toe, brake bias in that order, roughly, right? We didn't really talk about like changing this or changing that or what that does, what this does. If I change this, what outcome does it have? Because honestly, it's unnecessary. Because you're gonna have this cheat sheet and you can make the changes and go experience them. That's more important. Is go experience them. Try to after a run, try to just predict, not predict, but try to evaluate what exactly what we did today, right? Evaluate what is going on with the things that we talked about, the what and the when. What is happening? When is it happening? And talk the balance, response, and stability. Figure those things out. Based on that, you go to the cheat sheet and just look up. If it's more over, if the car's too understeery, just take a look. I want more oversteer. Okay, well, I can just change that and just change it and go see if it actually makes a positive response to the lap time. Ultimately, it's to the lap time, right? Because more lap time usually means that you generate more grip. So that's how you want to approach setup. And this is just the basics of the basics. Obviously, we haven't even looked at telemetry and evaluating based on telemetry. This is more a field based approach. So I think we did a pretty good job of covering it. I think that you guys executed well, and I think you also got a chance to see just how difficult it is to pinpoint exactly what's happening with the car. That's that was why I put that trick in there with the same setup. So don't be mad at me for that. But it's just and also setup A. That's just Dom set. That's the point three set that I posted. My changes to Dom set. That's what that was. Setup A. Okay. And this is probably one of the toughest tracks to test on. Right? It's just it is tough. I would say if you're gonna test somewhere, try to test somewhere where it's flat. Barcelona's a good one. Okayama, that's a good one. This one's really tough to test on because in the mountain, it really depends if you're on the right line. If you're on the right line, then the car will not react a certain way as if you were off that line. And changes sometimes don't make sense because of the camber, the compressions, all those things that are happening. There's just so much going on that and we didn't even really cover damper. I haven't even put dampers in here because dampers are even more complicated, and I'll just stay away from tuning dampers for now. Just concentrate. If you're gonna concentrate on something, spring changes, camber, ARB changes, and ride height changes, differential changes. Those four are the ones you want to go after and start testing. Yeah. So what is that improving? If you do that, what specifically is that improving? Because you're feeling, yeah. So you're it's increasing your sensitivity to what the car is doing, right? Because you're feeling new things, different things. and you're adapting to them. And so ultimately, everything is about increasing the sensitivity, and that's why you see Formula One drivers, GT drivers, they go and they drive rally, right? Why? Because in rally you really get that sensitivity because it's just on another other level. The speed of how much the car moves around, right? Drifting, you really develop that sensitivity. Similar to these MotoGP guys, they a lot of them they go and they do rallycross. So that's one of the reasons is if you increase your sensitivity and working on setup, using setups that are twitchier, they're gonna increase your sensitivity. Are you gonna go faster at the beginning? No, but in the long run, yes, you will. So that was a very good point, David. Very nice. Next week you're doing the session. So next week is gonna be Bathurst actual. Oh no, next week's the race. So next week we will not have a session because we have Bathurst. So we'll take. So there are different skill sets, right? There's and one skill set is adaptability. And a driver could be really good and may not have the same adaptability as another driver who's maybe not as fast but can adapt better, right? So that driver may be able to adapt to different setups more quickly and be faster with the setup that he's not as good that he's not as confident in, right? Because he can adapt faster. So that's part of it. So ultimately, in a team though, you're gonna have to adapt, right? Because unless everybody's gonna say, well, unless you're the fastest, like Nick said, right? You're gonna have to adapt to the fastest driver. But normally it's not that way. It normally is the other way around, where the faster driver adapts to the slower drivers. That's normally how it goes, in my opinion, not the other way around. Um, because the Okay, so you're in separate cars. So in that case, you didn't really need to adapt. You could have just changed the setup because you're in different cars. Yeah. Um, But if you're in the same car, usually it's the faster driver that adapts because remember what I said. The faster driver normally requires out of these three things here, a faster driver normally requires less stability from the setup. They require more response and more in a balance that's more towards oversteer. That's what they require. A Not a slower driver, but a driver that doesn't have as much experience, right? They're gonna need more stability. They're gonna require that. Because if they don't have that stability, then they just can't drive the car. So that's why usually the faster driver adapts to the slower driver because to adapt to the faster driver, you would have to adapt to less stability, and you just can't adapt to less stability if you don't have the skill to do it. So that's what it comes down to. But does this make sense? Because I don't the most of you described setups in this manner before, or think about setups in the manner that we're talking about them right now. Setup changes. Okay, good. Okay, so now it's more nuanced, right? There's more to think about because it's not just one phase, it's multiple phases. Because a change during trail break is not going to have the same effect as it is going to have it on the threshold break because the car's moving in a different direction. The weight of the car is moving in a different direction, right? Because when you're threshold braking, the weight's going in the front going down. When you're trail braking, technically, when I say trail brake, it's the release to trail brake is usually when the front is popping up right during the release of the brake. So the weight is actually moving up. So if you make a change, that's going to impact these two phases very differently. That's why it's important to really pinpoint exactly where it's happening. And normally, when someone says oversteer on exit, you don't just you don't just go for the solution. You actually have to look at the mid corner and you have to look at the entry, because normally the further you are in the corner, the more things that have impacted where the car is now, right? So you have to look at what led to that. What led to it. You don't just look at the outcome. You have to find the root cause of what happened. And a lot of times it's the understeer to snap oversteer. And so people will say, okay, well the car is unstable, it's oversteering on exit, but then you actually look and they're understeering mid corner, and then the car catches, the front tires grip up, and then it snaps. So it's very easy to make the wrong change. Correct. Yep. Go ahead. But what is the goal of the throttle on exit? Okay, but so then what is the goal ultimately? So where is the so the goal is somewhere between jabbing the throttle and 100%, like getting to 100% at a certain speed. So what speed is that? See what I mean? Okay. Yeah. I mean I agree with that statement. I don't disagree with that statement. Definitely not. But more importantly, what's this is the way I look at things for building a corner. And these are the check marks. I focus on these three, and then the fourth comes later. But one, brake consistently at threshold of tire grip on a straight line. Must hit the apex as far inside of the corner as possible until given a reason not to. Usually that's something that causes less grip, right? Bumps, excessive curbs, dirt, water, whatever it is. Three, must connect apex with brake throttle transition at the apex. So at the apex, that has to happen. If it doesn't happen, this is an instant red flag. It is instant red flag. And throttle should be applied confidently. That's the same thing as you're saying. Like it shouldn't be just you shouldn't jab at it, right? You need to apply it confidently in a smooth manner. But think about the goal of setup is to maximize grip, right? Increase grip. The more grip you have, the more confidently you're going to be able to get on throttle, and the faster you're going to be able to get on throttle, right? So ultimately, the fat you want to get on throttle faster and faster and faster and faster, and the setup will allow you to do that. At some point, you'll get on throttle, and the car will just too fast, and the car will either oversteer or understeer, one of the two, and then you know your balance. But this throttle should be applied confidently is really really important. So if you see any sort of hesitation on the throttle, any sort of hesitation, we'll go back to our bus. But basically, this is the telemetry. I'm releasing. I'm braking. Threshold. Release. Trail to the apex. And there I get on throttle. So let's say I get on throttle here. Confident or not confident throttle? What do you guys think? Okay. So it's late. That's yeah, good. It's late. Throttle transition. Instant red flag. Remember, right? Instant red flag. Something is wrong here. So more than likely, what happened here? What like this is there's a pause here in inputs. So what could I do to close this gap between the throttle and brake? Could I get on throttle earlier and then go like this? Yes, I could do that. Maybe. Maybe. Is this a confident throttle now though? Definitely not. Definitely not. Okay. Remember this right here? Must, star, star, connect apex with brake throttle transition. There's no if, ands, buts about this. So this is a rule. Now you can break the rule and get on throttle earlier than the apex, but you got that's advanced stuff. But must connect it. If that doesn't happen, that's the red flag, right? The red flag is either they're not connected, the brake to throttle transition is not connected, or it's uh, or the brake throttle transition is not connected to the apex. Those two are the red flags. So now we're saying that, and so in this case is like, okay, where's the apex? Is the apex here? Is this the apex or is this the apex? Right? Now it's more complicated because now we're looking at the apex. But right now in this example, we're just looking at the brake to throttle transition. So how can we tie them together here? What changes can we make? So someone said we could brake later, right? We could start braking later, and that would allow us to just have the same, pretty much the same line, but just a little later. Bam. That should work, right? Because now we're braking less. All this is less braking. So the car will still be at the same speed and should still be okay. We could probably brake at the same place and brake a little less, right? That might get us all the way there. Um, we could maybe release earlier, release just a tad bit earlier, and that'll get us all the way there, right? Or we could trail brake less. I'll just go from the top here. We could just release more on the trail brake, just less trail brake, right? So those are all things you could do, and it depends on the corner, right? Depends on the camera of the corner, depends on what's going on. So, but you have to figure out how to get this to be at the apex. And a more confident throttle would be right, because there's a delay here for sure, right? This is fairly confident, but there is a delay there. So this is much more confident, and this would be really confident. This would be a stab at it, right? Now, if you could do this, I mean, you're I don't know. I don't know how you would do that, but active pedal maybe. I don't know. Joe could do it. Oh, okay, okay. Never mind. Never mind. Brake. Something with the brake. Something weird. I don't know. But that. So if this is happening, then you can start concentrating on setup as much, which much with much more accuracy is the thing, right? And once you have this number three, then you can actually find out if you're at the right apex and make changes to the apex based on this rule, which means that make your apex earlier or later based on the car's behavior on corner exit. And remember that rule I gave you guys. If the exit's easy, the apex is late. If the exit is hard, the apex is too early. And so if your corner meets these three criteria, then you can apply the fourth one to find out the optimal apex. But if you don't have these three, then you can't do that. You have to first apply the first three. So, but again, conservative on entry, maximize exit. If you're past the edge of grip, you're not going to feel the car. You're going to be unstable and you're not going to get good reading of what the car is doing. So ultimately, that's what it comes down to. Any last questions? I'm going to stop the recording here. There are no more questions. Unfortunately, it was only half the recording.